We begin with the latest on the painful economic shutdown caused by the coronavirus pandemic, with many Americans struggling to pay rent, buy food, and cover their health care costs. This week, the Department of Labor's weekly jobless claims jumped to 6.6 million, a staggering number with losses in nearly every corner of the economy. And earlier Friday, the department reported a loss of more than 700,000 jobs in March. This all comes as state and federal authorities prepare for new hotspots and warn that difficult times are ahead. President Trump continues to face fierce criticism from Democrats and some Republicans for his handling of the outbreak. He has defended himself at every turn and expressed optimism.
This is going to be a rough 2-week period. As a nation, we face a difficult few weeks as we approach that really important day when we're going to see things get better all of a sudden. And it's going to be like a burst of light.
Joining me tonight, Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, and Jerry Seib, executive Washington editor for the Wall Street Journal. Peter, we'll begin with you. What do these economic numbers signal about the economy?
Well, look, this is about as bad a number as anybody could have hoped for at this point. 11.7 million Americans at this point are seeking or on unemployment. That is about 50% higher than the peak of the 2008 financial crisis. This is really the beginning. We're not even anywhere near the peak that people expect. So many businesses are shutting doors. So many people are out of work that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. And this, suggests basically this is not going to be a short-term thing. The president would like it to be. The president would like to think that come the summer or fall, whenever things can begin to open up again, things will just simply snap back into place. Maybe they will, but that's not the way the professional economists are looking at it. The CBO this week, the Congressional Budget Office, projected that the unemployment will reach 10% and then stay as high as 9% through 2021, which is, of course, after the presidential election that matters, of course, so much to President Trump.
Yamiche, what does this all mean for low-income Americans? Are they getting the money they need as soon as they can?
Well, what we know is that low-income communities, experts say, are more susceptible in some cases to the virus because they don't have the same protections. There are people who are living in close quarters oftentimes. There are also people who sometimes don't have access to the best health care. So even if they get the virus, it's also a matter of can they actually go to the hospitals and the doctors to get treated and get tested. So what we understand is that there's a real worry there among people who work with those populations of whether or not they're going to be protected from the virus. Then you add to that the fact that Democrats say that these are people that rely on a lot of federal programs that right now haven't been bulked up in the face of the pandemic. One example would be food stamps. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Democrats pushed hard to try to get an increase in the the amount of food stamps people have and get people more help. And she said that Republicans pushed back on that. So there's also this question of whether or not low-income communities are getting the resources that they need to be able to stay at home, to be able to feed and house themselves.
Jerry, the Wall Street Journal had interesting reporting today, revealing reporting about the new small business loan program, $350 billion in scope. It's struggling to get off the ground on Friday. Why is that, and what have you learned?
Well, the good news is there were probably about 10,000 loans made today, $3 billion plus. The problem is that's a drop in the bucket. And what our reporters found when they went out today was that a lot of the big banks, most of the big banks, weren't ready this morning to start making loans because there was a delay in the paperwork coming from the Small Business Administration in Washington. And some of those banks were only giving loans to existing customers, not to people who were walking in through the door. And this is all a problem because, and by the way, we had an interesting example in a report of a guy, a small business owner in Los Angeles, who moved from bank to bank to bank. He visited 4 banks today. 2 of them said, we don't know anything about this program. 1 of them said, we don't do Small Business Administration loans. And 1 was shut because of the virus. So this is a slow start. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because it's just one day, but speed is absolutely of the essence here, that this money needs to get out the door quickly to get to small businesses before they shut down entirely, while they're still alive and while they can still keep people on the payroll. This is inevitable in government programs to some extent, but this is a really important one.
Peter, what is the debate inside the West Wing about when the economy should reopen?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, that's one of the things that you take away from that briefing this week with those, hellacious death projections that were presented, 100,000 to 240,000, if in fact everybody does what they're supposed to do. We know they're not. So, as long as that curve is going up, the economy has to be basically shuttered, according to the experts. Now, the more you can flatten that curve, the better it is for the health institutions, better it is for the hospitals to be ready and handle the influx they're about to have. But it also could mean that it keeps the economy closed for a little longer. That's the real problem, right? Is that the thing that actually might be good might also be bad at the same time. Here in Washington, D.C., the mayor, for instance, just projected today that the peak might not be until the end of June. That's still, of course, 3 months away. The idea that we're going to stay indoors and keep businesses closed for 3 months goes even beyond the capacity of this $2 trillion bill to keep the economy afloat. So it's a real conundrum. Within the White House, you hear, obviously, the public health experts emphasizing the need for these social restrictions. You heard Deborah Birx yesterday at the White House briefing, in effect, diverging from the president on that. And then you hear the economic advisors saying, look, you've got to be very wary of all these millions of people who are out of work, all these, tens of thousands of businesses that are at stake here. And these conflicting and yet both very compelling interests are at the heart of this debate.